Hello and thanks for joining us on the news at 10 on NTA News 24. We are reaching you live from the nation's capital. I'm Dennis Adegunloye. Let's bring you the headlines.
We have worked very hard to sustain the early submission of the MTEF and FSP.
House of Representatives passes 2021 supplementary budget of 982.7 billion naira. Presidential Committee on Salaries meeting with health workers unions deadlocked. Plus, preliminary report on air crash that killed former Chief of Army Staff and 11 others to be ready next week. All right, let's begin at the National Assembly, where the House of Representatives has passed the 2021 supplementary budget of 982.7 billion naira. The amount approved shows an addition of 86 billion naira to the 895.8 billion forwarded by the executive. National Assembly correspondent Lami Ali reports.
Aside the supplementary budget approval, which is for armed forces and COVID-19 procurements, in addition to making available funds for adjustments of wages in the public service, plenary featured bringing to the notice of members an executive communication seeking legislative approval of the medium-term expenditure framework and fiscal strategy paper for 2022 to 2024.
To sustain the restoration of the January to December financial year. On our part, we have worked very hard to sustain the early submission of the MTEF and FSP. This is to allow the National Assembly sufficient time to perform its important statutory duty of reviewing the framework and strategy paper.
Other bills passed are the 2021 budget of the Federal Capital Territory and the bill to establish Nigeria Police Academy, while 3 bills passed second reading. The House has resolved to investigate poor electricity supply in Lafia and Nasarawa State 25 years after its creation, as raised by Sarik Dahiru, and alleged unfair treatment of farmers in Kebbi State by the Minister of Agriculture in the ongoing farmers registration, as moved by Shehu Koko.
Visit at the Abuja transmission station as ascertain the level of the ongoing project and engage the Abuja Electricity Distribution Company.
Urge the Federal Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development to send enumerators to my states, that's Kebbi State, proposal of restraint of farmers for them to get the subsidy of fertilizer.
Meanwhile, the House has called for measures to prevent maternal mortality resulting from cesarean births, as moved by Sergius Ogun, just as it resolves to investigate the murder of the Director General of Scientific Equipment Development Institute, Enugu, as moved by the Deputy Minority Leader, Toby Okechukwu.
Urge the Federal Ministry of Health to provide improved facilities and well-equipped medical personnel at all public hospitals across Nigeria.
The late Professor Ndubuisi, who died in the course of his national duty, was reportedly killed alongside the police orderly.
The need to curb influx of fake drugs into Nigeria, as raised by Chike Okafor, need to establish medical clinics in airports, tabled by Martins Chinedu. The need to upgrade the Dambaba Sunte Airport Jalingo to an international airport from Kasimu Bello Megari, and the need to assist victims of windstorm in Jakarta State, as noted by Meki Aliman, were adopted during plenary.
Our domestic market is awash with fake and substandard and counterfeit products.
And liaise with the state government for the possible takeover of the airport.
Have suffered loss of properties, and even their means of livelihood is seriously affected as a result of the windstorm.
The House also adopted the report of appeal that seeks research and development for the armed forces. From the National Assembly, Lami Ali, NTA News.
Now, the disagreement over what should constitute hazard allowances of junior and senior health workers may yet linger for longer. This is as a result of the inability of union leaders to harmonize their submissions and agree on fixed amounts for consideration by the federal government. Minister of Labour and Employment, Dr. Chris Ngige, expressed disappointment over the developments after the latest meeting between the Presidential Committee on Salaries and the health workers' unions. Joseph Otsen has more.
Discussion between the Presidential Committee on Salaries over upward review of hazard allowance for health workers have been on for over 3 months.
If before it was railroaded that everybody who is working in the hospital should get the same hazard allowance, we want to point out very clearly that the risks are not the same.
We have always emphasized on the issue of equity, not equality.
Though the federal government has moved up from the 5% monthly hazard allowance paid health workers in Nigeria with an offer of 350% for junior and 600% for senior workers, the Nigerian Medical Association and the Joint Health Sector Union are having varying submissions and are struggling to shift grounds. The latest engagement has also ended in a deadlock.
The proposals they have submitted differ, and they are not able to harmonize down. We also will take both positions back to Presidential Salaries Committee and look at it with salaries, incomes, and wages, and then we can then take a government position.
On the threat of strike by both unions, the minister says he has called on them to obey labor laws and withdraw the idea. The federal government has proposed a sum of 37 billion naira for monthly hazard allowance for health workers, but the two unions are finding it difficult to agree on what should be the share of the senior and junior. In Abuja, Joseph Otsen, NTA News.
Issues of high maternal mortality rates and calls for equity across the globe on the rights of women and the girl child were at the center of a discourse as the world gets set to observe 2021 Population Day. An advocacy to end issues responsible for these deprivations resonated at a press briefing by the National Population Commission and the United Nations Population Fund in Abuja. Oluseye Adeagbo has details.
COVID-19, a pandemic still ravaging the globe, comes not just with health issues, but also with harmful practices and gender-based violence affecting mostly women and girls, thereby undermining equality. Hence, the 2021 World Population Day is with the theme Rights and Choices are the answer. Whether baby boom or bust, the solution lies in prioritizing the reproductive health and rights of all people. These population managers say will address challenges of women and girls in the context of the coronavirus pandemic and fronting a movement of equity across the globe with focus on retaining and expanding the rights of the female folks.
How do we as a nation prioritize sexual and reproductive health and rights of women and girls that is devoid of gender-based violence?
So I think it's important to understand that we're in this together, and only if we respect each other's right to make individual decisions are we going to find the solutions that actually works for each and everybody.
And while Nigeria awaits an actual census to aid recommitment to demographic dividend and well-being of all, National Population Commission says the process is on course.
Government on its part, it has given us the sufficient support. In the light of that, we have already done 600, as of now, 630 local governments out of the 774 of the Federation in terms of preparing for the next census whenever government so gives us the directives.
11th of July every year is a day set aside by the United Nations to be observed as the World Population Day. In Abuja, Oluseye Adeagbo, NTA News.
The Nigeria Customs Service has generated more than 1 trillion naira in the first 6 months of the year, 290 billion naira higher than what it generated within the same period in 2020. Kunle Adeyeye reports that the service announced this at a briefing in Abuja.
The COVID-19 pandemic presented a new challenge to the world, but the Nigeria Customs Service says its ability to adapt has seen it afloat rather than sink, a success it attributed to reforms and technology.
The service has generated the sum of 1,3billion,752,951,735 naira, as against the 748,395,834 naira, with a positive difference of 290,204,555,900 naira.
Compliance with the recommendation of the tripartite meeting of Customs Administration of Nigeria, Benin and Niger Republic aided intelligence gathering in dealing with challenges of cross-border crimes, which Customs spokesperson says led to 2,333 seizures with duty-paid value of more than 4 billion naira. Customs has also extended the verification of privately owned aircrafts as a result of positive response. In Abuja, Kunle Adeyeye, NTA News.
Insurance experts advocate improved public enlightenment towards addressing reluctance of business owners to get insurance cover for occupational hazards. Over now to Kunle Adeyeye again for business news.
Nigeria being Africa's largest economy, active participation in insurance by established entrepreneurs and even upcoming ones should be taken as priority. With intermittent fire incidents and other disasters all over the country, business owners are still taking the risk of not getting their businesses insured.
Improve and ensure prompt payment of claims and compensation to give value for money to all the contributors in the ECA scheme. We are working on that, developing models that has to address each function and each activity being carried out by every department, so that we'll make sure that, because that is one of the things that will be able to reduce our operational cost.
Experts therefore advocate insurance as the remedy to obtain compensation for those who suffer from occupational accidents, injury or death in line of duty. With Business News, I'm Kunle Adeyeye.
You're watching the news at 10 on NTA News 24. Up ahead. Ministry of Information in Germany demands unconditional return of more than 1,000 Benin bronzes looted in 19th century. This and more after the break. Good to have you back. Now let's take you to Germany, where the federal government has demanded a full and unconditional return of 1,130 Benin bronzes that were looted from the African nation in the 19th century and domiciled in German museums. Minister of Information and Culture Lai Mohammed made the demand in Berlin, Germany, during separate meetings with the German Minister of State for Culture, Professor Monika Grütters, and the German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas. Anthony Forsen reports.
The Information and Culture Minister, Lai Mohammed, who led the Nigerian delegation to the talks, said the return should be whole rather than substantial. He also said the issue of provenance, which has to do with the place of origin of the artifacts, should not be allowed to unduly delay the repatriation of the artworks. At a separate meeting with the German foreign minister, Lai Mohammed said there should be no conditions attached to the return of the artifacts, which he described as an idea whose time has come, adding that there is the need for the parties to commit to definite timelines for the return of the Bini bronzes. But the beginning of a new vista of stronger relations pivoted upon cultural diplomacy between both countries. The minister thanked the government of Germany for taking the lead in the global effort to repatriate all artifacts that were looted from Nigeria and indeed from Africa. The governor of Edo State, Godwin Obaseki, who is also a member of the Nigerian delegation, said a museum is being built in Benin City to house the artifacts upon their return as part of a new cultural district in the city. The governor said he is attending the talks to demonstrate the stronger partnership involving the federal government of Nigeria, the Benin royal family, and the people of Edo State. The Nigerian ambassador to Germany, Yusuf Tugga, said the repatriation of the Benin bronzes should be seen as an opportunity to take the cooperation between Nigeria and Germany to a greater height, describing it as an opportunity that must not be missed. The German Minister of State for Culture, Professor Guterres, said the way they handled the issue of Benin bronzes is important to address colonial past, describing it as an important personal concern. She disclosed that the 1,130 artifacts from the beginning of 2022. Professor Guterres noted that the fact that Germany has twice sent delegations to Nigeria for talks over the planned repatriation is an indication that both sides have moved beyond mere talks, saying all the museums in Germany that are holding Benin bronzes have agreed to cooperate. The Nigerian delegation includes the Director General National Commission for Museums and Monuments, Professor Abba Tijani, and the Benin Crown Prince, His Royal Highness Ezelahe Ewari. They were later taken on a guided tour of the Humboldt Forum, a royal palace turned museum in the heart of Berlin that houses artworks from around the world. Anthony Forson, NTA News.
In the meantime, Nigeria and Austria are building a stronger partnership in economic, trade and cultural ties in new diplomatic relations. At a formal presentation of Nigeria's new envoy to Austria and Slovakia, Ambassador Suleiman Dauda Umar, to Presidents Alexander Van der Bellen in Vienna, the two nations express hope for better engagements in their bilateral agreements. The two oil-producing nations have been in diplomatic relations for decades. Both countries are engaged in exports in addition to energy deals. Now, Aviation Minister Hadi Sirika says there is much improvement in the sector since the coming in of the Buhari administration, with many of the country's airports now operating according to the dictates of International Civil Aviation Organization rules. The minister, at the weekly executive briefing of the press at the presidential villa, Abuja, says there is now approval for civil aviation security personnel to bear arms, including the need to compensate passengers for delays at the airports by national and international carriers. State House correspondent Jide Onifade reports.
There is no job loss as the aviation sector needs more competent hands to operate, says Minister Hadi Sirika, as he briefs the State House press corps on the achievements of his ministry since receiving the baton to lead the sector. The minister explains that despite the fact that the sector was arguably the worst hit by the COVID-19 pandemic, it has received and continues to receive attention of the federal government.
Things that we've been doing, all of the energy that President Muhammadu Buhari has been pushing into civil aviation and the money is actually to attend to those things that will make you safe, secure when you depart point A and arrive point B. I am putting this forward so that we understand where we're coming from, and the achievements and the things that we've done are all around this focus.
Some of the achievements, as the minister explains, include training of staff and capacity building, buying and installation of equipment, repair of runways, and many others targeted at lifting passengers safely to their destinations. And these include the establishment of cargo and agro-allied terminals across states to move agricultural produce both within and outside the country, The roadmap also includes the creation of a leasing company, which will, in addition to leasing of equipment, help to facilitate loans.
Already designate our 4 airports. We achieved that as export processing zone, and you know that it will create, around the airport, a more efficient, business-friendly trade environment, with less bureaucracy on one side, and of course red tapeism, because of the associated fiscal incentives and packages that the Ministry of Trade and Investment had done.
On the alleged reversal of concessions and the outright sale of infrastructure, the minister debunks this, stressing that the federal government will continue to develop more infrastructure and put them in the hands of the private sector to manage on behalf of the people.
There are scientific ways now, using technology, to keep our airports safe. So there are competent people, brainy people, with kids, the into ICT and so on, that will participate in our AFSEC, aviation security. And Mr. President has approved that they bear arms and they have sniffer dogs.
In the State House, Jide Onifade, NTA News.
In the meantime, the Accident Investigation Bureau, AIB, says the preliminary report on the Nigerian Air Force Beechcraft aircraft, which crashed in May 2021, killing the former Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Ibrahim Atahiru, and 11 others, will be ready next week, but was quick to add that it is within the purview of the Air Force to make it public. This was when the AIB released 8 additional aircraft accident reports, making a total of 67 reports since inception of the Bureau. Emmanuel Ayimiro reports.
The Accident Investigation Bureau has cleared the air on the much speculated outcome of the investigative reports on the 3 military crashes which occurred this year. While the Kaduna Air Crash preliminary report is to be ready next week, the AIB is not involved in the investigation of the other 2.
The other crash that happened in Abuja, we actually assisted the Air Force, but we did not help in the investigation. We assisted them in the download of the FDR and the CVR. So this last one, it's different. That means we have to write a full final report, which we're going to present to Air Force.
For the latest 8 additional reports that covered between 2010 to 2019, AIB says 1 is classified as accident, while the remaining 7 are serious incidents. The reports captured factors responsible for the crash and safety recommendations.
Since I came on board, we've done 72% of the entire reports that have been released by AIB in history. So, and that's about 48 reports so far, out of 67.
AIB says the reports and recommendations are for the regulatory body and affected airlines to learn from. Emmanuel Ayemiro, NTA News.
In other news, the federal government has approved the establishment of an emergency communications center in Zamfara State. Abubakar Usman Akwanga reports that this was disclosed by the Minister of Communications and Digital Economy, Issa Ali Pantami, when he received the governor of Zamfara State, Muhammad Bello, who visited the ministry.
You know that the first request to support security, that of Emergency Communication Center, that very day you asked for it, I have directed my colleagues to ensure that it was included in our budget of 2021. And I'm glad to say that the center has been approved.
I have approved the ICT hub in Zamfara State, and it's ongoing, the construction is ongoing, and the emergency call center, which you approved to improve the security situation in Zamfara State.
The initiative is in addition to other digital infrastructure established by the federal government in the state to address issues of insecurity, as well as encourage e-learning amongst primary school pupils. Governor Bello commended the minister for the massive transformation in the ministry, which has placed the country on the global map as a top-performing ICT-inclined country. Now to issues of security, and Nigeria's security is basically the priority of governance at different levels of administration, with the need for a more sophisticated approach in guaranteeing a safe and promising population. The national concern necessitated the maiden launch of a peace and inclusive security initiative by the Nigeria Governors Forum. Abubakar Usman Akwanga reports.
Desperate situation, they say, require desperate action. This essentially is the focal point of this gathering by state and non-state actors to fine-tune processes of overcoming the present security challenges confronting the country.
This peace and security initiative of the Nigerian Governors Forum will help establish strategic dialogues and a mechanism to stimulate collaborative responses among stakeholders on conflict and security at the federal, at the state, and at the local and civil society levels.
Terrorism, banditry, kidnapping, and secessionist moves, coupled with the negative use of the social media, were factored as threats to Nigeria's stability as a nation.
The UK Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office recognised the important role the NGF plays in setting the peace and security agenda, in building state-level and community-level structures and institutions to reduce violence.
Representatives of the former head of state, General Abdulsalami Abubakar, and other prominent Nigerians say deployment of technology is critical in containing contemporary security threats.
The Governors Forum has taken a completely different shape, and we really appreciate the effort to become a bit diagnostic about the causative factors of this crisis.
The project is designed to develop mechanisms that will stimulate effective collaboration with communities to strengthen strategic measures of surmounting the emerging threats with attention to social network programs. In Abuja, Abubakar Usman Akwanga, NTA News.
You're on to the news at 10 on NTA News 24. Stay with us. We'll be back after this break.